Welcome to the history section.
Today we're focusing on a really pivotal transition in the early Western voyages. It's the shift from that initial scouting of the smaller islands to a much more focused strategic exploration of the major land masses.
So we're talking about Cuba and then later Española.
Exactly. This period, from late October through December, is crucial because the narrative moves beyond simple discovery.
It becomes about something else.
It becomes about geopolitical maneuvering, these significant cultural encounters, and ultimately the establishment of that first European foothold.
So our account begins after the fleet has done its initial reconnaissance of Isabella.
Right.
The Admiral seems to have recognized that while those smaller islands were abundant, they were also a bit repetitive.
Ecologically and culturally, yes. He'd gotten the gist of it.
So his immediate goal changes. He needs to sail toward a landmass of greater consequence.
And that landmass was Cuba. The fleet reaches its northern coast on Sunday, October 28th.
And the initial accounts of this arrival, they set a distinctly new tone, don't they?
Yeah. They do. The tone regarding the territory's perceived worth just skyrockets.
It's an immediate shift.
Precisely. The moment they sight Cuba, the historical accounts convey a profound change in expectation.
The Admiral's assessment is that this land is, and I think the quote is, better and richer than anything they'd seen so far.
And that rapid value judgment wasn't just about the size of the island. It was driven by the geography.
The sheer scale of it.
The grand swale of the hills, the mountains, these sweeping, extensive plains, and of course, the vast coastlines.
All of this suggested what? A more settled, wealthy territory.
A settled, wealthy, and agriculturally viable territory, one that was, ripe for exploitation.
The first anchorage is detailed in a large river. And what seems to have struck the explorers was the natural environment itself.
The scale of it. The flora in particular. They document these trees that were just unusually tall and large.
Bearing fruits and flowers that were completely foreign to them.
And you see this very clear attempt in the records to catalog this new environment, to try and map it onto familiar European categories.
Like recognizing purslane, for example.
Yes, a common herb. But the more telling observation was detecting something they believed to be wheat growing among the local grasses.
Which was probably a mistake, botanically speaking.
Almost certainly. But that effort, even if it was mistaken, it really underscores their immediate priority.
Which was finding high-value staples.
High-value agricultural staples that could support a future European presence or be imported back to Spain.
And beyond the plants, there was the bird life.
The sheer density of avian life was apparently overwhelming. The whole area was described as a delightful place because of the multitude of birds.
So when the landing party finally goes ashore, the encounter follows a pattern we've seen before.
Apprehension on the part of the indigenous people, yes.
They find 2 huts, but they're abandoned. The inhabitants had fled.
But they left their possessions behind. Nets, fishing tackle, and notably a dog that did not bark.
Which suggests a specialized breed, maybe for tracking rather than defense.
It does. And the Admiral's response here is strategically insightful. He knew he had to maintain strict discipline.
So he prohibits his men from touching anything.
Strictly prohibits them from taking or disturbing any of the possessions. And this wasn't about altruism.
No, it was an intelligence mandate.
Exactly. He focused his men solely on gathering information for the sovereigns, understanding that looting would guarantee future conflict and, completely seal off any channels for communication.
Following that cautious start, the exploration continues northward along this immense Cuban coastline.
They name a second large river, the Rio de Mañez.
And the reports indicate its shores were heavily populated.
But the people remained profoundly shy. They would flee to these high, round, green mountains at the mere sight of the European ships.
This systematic avoidance must have been frustrating.
It forced the Admiral to pause and reconsider his approach. He reasoned that a military landing, a show of force, would only amplify their fear.
It would guarantee they'd never return.
And it would sever their only link to vital local knowledge. So that restraint was a pragmatic necessity.
Which led to the decision for a more diplomatic solution.
A non-threatening one.
The dispatch of an inland embassy.
A very carefully composed group. 2 trusted Christians, accompanied by a local guide they had picked up back on San Salvador.
And the instructions were clear.
Travel upcountry, behave in a friendly manner, and return with comprehensive intelligence. The ships remained at anchor to give them the time they needed.
And while that embassy was away, the men back at the anchorage made a discovery about the local economy.
They did. They noted the wood the people were using for their fires was sourced from the mastic tree.
What's interesting is the comparison they make.
It is. They noted this Cuban mastic was much larger and more robust than the lentiscus tree known in the Mediterranean.
And that's a crucial detail, isn't it?
It is, because the mastic tree produces a valuable resin. It was used as a varnish, a breath freshener, an early form of chewing gum in Europe.
So identifying a superior source signaled another potential high-value commodity.
A commodity beyond gold, that's the key.
The embassy returns on November 5th, and they have the first really detailed account of indigenous Cuban life.
After traveling roughly 6 miles inland, they reached a village that showed a high degree of organization.
About 50 very large wooden huts thatched with palms.
And described as looking like tents or pavilions.
But the scale of this settlement is one of the most astonishing details.
It is. The research suggests this community was a highly centralized social unit, potentially containing as many as 1,000 kindreds.
Which tells you a lot about the Taino society in Cuba.
It speaks volumes. These were not scattered, transient groups. This was a concentrated, organized, and structurally advanced community. It would have required complex logistical and political management.
And the reception the Christians received.
One of immense, almost reverential welcome.
The principal people of the country met them and physically carried them on their shoulders to the main house.
Right. And once inside, the Europeans were seated on these specialized ceremonial chairs called dujos or duchos.
And the description of these duchos indicates a pretty sophisticated level of craftsmanship.
Yet in a clear social hierarchy. These weren't simple benches. They were carved from a single piece of wood, often shaped like a short-legged animal.
With a flared tail as the backrest.
Exactly. And seating the Christians on these designated status objects immediately placed them within a framework of high social or even divine authority.
This reverence was then solidified when the local people sat around them, kissing their hands and feet.
Under the deeply held belief that the Spanish had arrived from heaven, this interpretation that the explorers were supernatural visitors, that became the most valuable diplomatic asset the Spanish had.
The hospitality was pervasive. They offered the Christians cooked roots, described as being similar to European chestnuts.
And they urged them to stay for a significant period, 5 or 6 days.
Which suggests a desire to communicate more deeply than was possible through just the one guide from San Salvador.
It might. Perhaps indicating they hoped the Europeans could act as intermediaries or, help solve some local issues. We don't know for sure.
The embassy also provided some critical insight into the community's daily life.
They observed the common practice of lighting a firebrand and inhaling the smoke of certain herbs.
Which was a significant cultural practice.
Yes, noted either as a ceremonial rite or possibly linked to their dietary preparation. It raises interesting questions about the early uses of tobacco or similar plants in a social context.
And in terms of domestic animals.
The only 4-legged animals observed were those unique, silent, barkless dogs, which suggests a reliance on wild game or organized agriculture, not large-scale animal husbandry.
And on the topic of agriculture, the expedition noted extensive cultivated land.
Plots planted with various root crops, kidney beans, and, critically, a grain resembling panic grass.
Which the Spanish later identified as maize or corn.
And it was clearly a fundamental staple, consumed in diverse forms, boiled, roasted, or meticulously ground into flour. It suggested a food supply that was both reliable and sustainable.
But the most significant economic observation centered on cotton.
It did. The local community presented the ships with an astonishing quantity, specifically 12,500 pounds already spun into skeins.
And if you consider the economic implications of that for a moment.
It's a ready-made, massive supply of high-quality textile material.
And the indigenous people didn't cultivate this cotton through intensive annual planting.
No, they gathered it from perennial plants that were just growing wild in the fields.
The botanical analysis of these plants reinforced this idea of an endless, easily harvested resource.
It did. The explorers noted that the plants displayed every stage of development simultaneously. New buds, ripening bolls, and fully open cotton ready for harvest, all on the same plant.
That's proof of a perpetually replenishing resource base.
And it shifts the immediate economic priority away from the rumored gold toward a sustainable, scalable agricultural commodity.
Yet, the indigenous use of this massive cotton supply was surprisingly modest by European standards.
Very much so. The historical accounts confirm its primary uses were practical and not garment-related.
Making nets, constructing hammocks, their primary beds, and weaving small cloths.
Small cloths used only to cover private areas. The absence of full cotton clothing reinforced the Spanish perception that these people lived in a state of simplicity
which the Admiral often conflated with natural innocence.
and ease of subjugation.
But the final, and for the Admiral, the most compelling piece of intelligence gathered.
It concerned the true prize: gold.
When the Christians inquired about precious metals, pearls, or spices, the natives consistently pointed east.
And they indicated that these resources were abundant in a large neighboring land they called Bohio or Babic.
And this new intelligence immediately provides a definitive vector for the rest of the voyage.
It does. The Admiral could now abandon the slow coastal exploration of Cuba, which had yielded resources but no immediate gold, and set a course directly for the rumored motherlode.
So that marks the moment the voyage transitions from simple geographical discovery to a focused extractive mission.
Precisely.
With that intelligence mission complete, the Admiral departs from the Rio de Mares. But before leaving, there's a necessary step detailed.
Securing interpreters and cultural informants for the Spanish sovereigns, this required taking specific individuals from Cuba back to Castile.
The acquisition of these human resources was deliberate.
Very. 12 people, men, women, and children, were seized. And it's important to critically examine the Admiral's narrative here.
He states he ordered that all these captives be treated humanely.
He does, but we must acknowledge the inherent violence and disruption in seizing 12 individuals from their homes.
The act of capture was framed as a geopolitical necessity.
A move designed to provide the sovereigns with a direct link to the language and customs of these new territories.
There's an anecdote included that speaks to the trauma of this separation.
The woman whose husband and 2 children had already been taken aboard.
She voluntarily joins them, rowing out in a canoe to the ships.
Yes, she requested to stay with her family, prioritizing the unity of her kin even in captivity. The Admiral, viewing this as a sign of affection, complied, ensuring the whole family unit was transported together.
So on November 13th, the fleet set sail, intending to steer directly eastward for Bohia,
But they're almost immediately stymied by a strong north wind.
which forces them to alter their trajectory, compelling them to hug the coast of Cuba again.
And they anchor near a high ground they had previously charted.
This unforeseen detour leads to the discovery of a dense cluster of small islands.
Which the Admiral named El Mar de Nuestra Señora. These islands were remarkable for their density, often separated by less than a quarter league, yet possessing deep navigable channels.
And they were described as extremely pleasant to sail among.
Adorned with valuable trees like mastic, aloe, and palm.
While largely uninhabited, these islands were clearly frequented by fishermen.
And the account provides a striking description of the diet of the people who use these islands.
Their sustenance consisted heavily of fish, birds, crabs, and what the chronicler called loathsome things.
And we need to analyze this description carefully, separating the Spanish bias from indigenous resourcefulness.
The diet included large spiders, white worms found in rotten wood,
And decayed objects. Furthermore, the fishermen were noted to often eat the fish raw or only lightly roasted. The Spanish observer was clearly repulsed, explicitly stating that such a diet would sicken or even kill a European.
but this reaction should be contextualized.
Not as a lack of civilization, but as an example of extreme local ecological adaptation. The indigenous people were utilizing every available protein source in their environment.
Including insects and invertebrates.
A necessary survival strategy in specific, limited ecosystems where large game was absent. The Spanish judgment of loathsome reflects a profound cultural shock.
Beyond the diet, the Spanish noted a significant geophysical anomaly in this area.
They did. They recorded that the tides were the reverse of what they experienced in Spain. The tidal range was less, and critically, low tide occurred when they would have expected high tide,
Which speaks to the precision of the Admiral's log keeping.
documenting unusual local maritime conditions that would be critical for future navigation. Yes.
Now we move into what would become a highly consequential event. The separation of the fleet on November 21st.
After departing Puerto de Príncipe and setting course for Española, the captain of the Pinta, Martin Alonso Pinzon, intentionally separated his ship from the Admiral.
A clear act of insubordination.
Driven, as the historical account baldly states, by greed. Pinzon believed the gold reported from Bohio was within his independent reach.
And he used his ship's superior speed to pull ahead.
Without any navigational excuse or contrary wind, he ultimately vanished from sight.
The implications of Pinzon's defection are huge.
You can't overstate them. This wasn't just a navigational inconvenience, it was a devastating breakdown in the chain of command.
And a direct challenge to the admiral's authority.
And, more importantly, to the Crown's claim over any future discoveries Pinzon might make.
If Pinzon had found gold first and reported it independently,
it could have profoundly complicated the admiral's position and undermined the political and legal monopoly granted to him.
So the admiral is left with only 2 ships.
And facing unfavorable winds, he's forced to put back into Cuba, anchoring at a harbor he names Santa Catarina to take on essential supplies.
This necessary detour, though, proves to be another opportunity for strategic resource assessment.
The pause at Santa Catarina yielded significant findings. They secured fresh water, and near a local river they found stones that showed visible indications of gold.
Not a mother lode, but it confirmed the island's potential.
Exactly. And furthermore, the region was an ideal source for naval stores. They identified tall pines suitable for masts and valuable shipbuilding timbers like evergreen oaks and madroño trees.
This stop really cemented the region's strategic utility for Spain's future naval operations.
It did. Following this assessment, the admiral continued his eastward push, determined to reach Española.
He sails another 10 to 12 leagues, discovering a region rich in excellent harbors and large rivers.
He named one of these entrances Puerto Santo, and the accounts describe it with overwhelming enthusiasm, noting its exceptional beauty.
Deep waters, ranging from 5 to 8 fathoms.
And the river was aligned with what were recorded as the tallest and most beautiful palm trees the admiral had ever seen. The descriptions reflect a strong temptation to remain there.
During the exploration near this harbor, they found tangible evidence of the local civilization.
A huge canoe, over 63 feet long, capable of carrying 150 people. This finding speaks directly to the advanced maritime capabilities of the indigenous population,
suggesting organized travel and trade between islands.
They also encountered unusual cultural artifacts in nearby huts. They found a cake of wax and, more curiously, a man's skull hanging prominently in baskets.
And finding the same custom in a second hut led them to surmise this was a local practice.
The preservation of an ancestor's skull, likely as an act of reverence or to link the family unit to a shared lineage.
So finally, after sailing 107 leagues along the immense Cuban coast, the Admiral reaches its eastern end.
He crosses the intervening sea a journey of 16 leagues and arrives at the major island of Española on Wednesday, December 5th. He named the port of arrival San Nicolas.
Initial observations noted it was rockier than Cuba, with smaller trees.
But many resembled familiar Spanish small oaks and madroño trees. The subsequent explorations, though, quickly confirmed the island's immense strategic importance.
Driven by those persistent rumors of gold.
Always the gold.
The process of making diplomatic contact on Española was deliberate.
And founded on a gesture of goodwill, which contrasts sharply with the earlier seizures in Cuba.
On December 9th, 3 Christians observed naked indigenous people fishing. They fled, but the Spanish pursued and captured one girl, who wore a gold nose plug.
The nose plug confirmed the resource potential, but the Admiral used the capture for an immediate diplomatic opportunity.
He sent her back to shore entirely unharmed.
Loaded with gifts, trinkets, and, most notably, hawk's bells. This act of non-aggression and unexpected generosity served as a powerful and effective method for building confidence.
And the gesture achieved its desired effect.
It did. Shortly afterward, 3 indigenous men voluntarily came aboard the ships and agreed to accompany the Spanish back to their village.
Trust continued to grow rapidly,
which allowed for greater exploration. 9 armed men were then sent ashore, discovering a large village with over 1,000 huts.
The inhabitants, predictably, initially fled.
But the native guide from San Salvador was able to reassure them, once again communicating that narrative, that the Christians had arrived from heaven.
And this notion of supernatural arrival continued to disarm the local populations.
Persuaded of their celestial origin, the inhabitants returned to their homes. They carried the Spanish men on their shoulders as a sign of respect, provided food, and readily fulfilled all requests.
This led to highly favorable reports about the population.
It did. The reports painted a picture of a welcoming society. The people were described as lighter-skinned, handsome, friendly, and notably courteous,
reinforcing the Admiral's belief that they were gentle and easy to subdue.
And critically, these inhabitants also reaffirmed the vital intelligence that the most abundant gold reserves were located further east on the island.
These positive reports were quickly tested by the political dynamics with a neighboring power.
The encounter with the cacique from the adjacent island of Tortuga, a large canoe carrying 40 people, led by this cacique, arrived at the anchorage.
And a momentary conflict erupted when a local man of Española
Attempted to maintain the peace, but his people resorted to throwing stones at the visiting Tortuga canoe. The Admiral, displaying early political favoritism, intervened to favor the King of Española.
a calculated move to secure a powerful local ally.
Immediately upon arrival, yes. After this brief, mediated skirmish, the cacique of Tortuga departed.
But not before providing one final, crucial piece of information.
He confirmed the gold rumors, declaring that Española held more gold than Beibec, and offered a geographical update. The gold source was 14 days' journey from his current location.
The peak of this diplomatic interaction occurred on Tuesday, December 18th.
With the formal visit of the principal king of that part of Española,
His arrival demonstrated an impressive level of state dignity. He was carried in a litter, attended by over 200 people.
it reflected a well-organized, centralized political structure, and the Admiral understood the importance of mirroring this dignity.
He insisted the king dine with him, seating him at the table below the stern castle.
It was a demonstration of high political protocol, signaling that the Spanish acknowledged and respected the king's status, even while asserting a greater power.
And the dining protocol was meticulously observed.
The king maintained great restraint and dignity, eating only a small tasting of the food shared by the Admiral. His attendants remained standing throughout the meal.
Only 2 elderly counselors were permitted to sit at his feet.
And the king shared his drink exclusively with these counselors, raising the cup to their lips. This public performance of hierarchical restraint fascinated the Spanish.
The exchange of gifts that followed solidified the relationship.
The king presented the Admiral with thin pieces of worked gold and a finely woven belt. Tangible proof of gold, even if not in massive quantities.
And in return, the Admiral gave the king red shoes and a bottle of orange water.
Exotic European novelties. But the exchange was secondary to the political assertion. The Admiral explicitly used this moment to assert the power of the Spanish sovereigns.
He showed the king portraits of Ferdinand and Isabella, the royal banners, the Christian cross,
and declared that the entire island was now under their command, and that the sovereigns commanded the world.
The records say that the king and his counselors were visibly impressed by these symbols of European power.
Especially the vivid portraits in the banners. It reinforced that existing belief in the Spanish as divine, powerful visitors.
The king's departure was then capped off with a dramatic demonstration of Spanish military superiority.
The Admiral ordered numerous Lombard shots to be fired upon the king's landing. A Lombard was an early, large-caliber cannon.
And the noise and shock of the discharge terrified the indigenous crowd.
They fled in panic. It was a crucial, calculated lesson in the destructive power of Spanish weaponry, intended to secure the king's loyalty through both intimidation and awe.
This political maneuvering gives way to the tragic, central event of this early voyage, the loss of the flagship, the Santa Maria.
It occurred late on Christmas Eve, just before midnight. The sea was perfectly calm, but the Admiral, having gone without sleep for 2 days, had finally retired.
The disaster was a result of catastrophic negligence.
And a direct violation of standing orders. The Admiral had explicitly forbidden the helmsman from trusting the tiller to boys or inexperienced crew.
But assured by the calm sea, the helmsman delegated the tiller to a ship's boy and retired to sleep himself.
The consequences were immediate and severe. Around midnight, the unsupervised ship drifted silently onto reefs or shoals near Punta Santa.
The first indication of danger was the noise of the swells breaking against the hull.
A sound loud enough to be heard a league away. The Admiral immediately arose upon hearing the terrifying noise of the water breaking where it should have been deep.
The subsequent response of the crew was a monumental failure of leadership
and loyalty. The ship's master was ordered by the Admiral to take the caravel's boat and cast an anchor astern to try and tow the ship off the shoals.
But instead of following this procedure,
the master and many other sailors, prioritizing their own survival, abandoned the Santa Maria and fled in the boat toward the Niña.
This desertion by the senior crew sealed the Santa Maria's fate.
It did. The Admiral was left with no means of moving the flagship. When the fleeing sailors reached the Niña, that crew, witnessing the cowardice, refused to take them aboard,
forcing them to turn back, though by then it was too late.
Realizing the immense value of the cargo and materials and the necessity of maintaining that fragile alliance, the Admiral immediately dispatched messengers to inform the local king, Guacanagari.
And the king's reaction provides a stark contrast to the betrayal shown by the Spanish crew.
King Guacanagari, upon hearing the news, immediately burst into tears, showing sincere grief over the calamity. He mobilized his people, supplying large numbers of canoes and men to assist in the salvage.
Working quickly, they cleared the deck and unloaded the extensive cargo in a remarkably short time.
This act of assistance provided the Spanish with a profound, almost unbelievable example of indigenous integrity. The king personally oversaw the entire operation, securing all Spanish goods,
Guarding them and moving them to 2 storage houses he provided.
and the admiral noted with genuine astonishment that the natives guarded the property as if it were their own, ensuring that not a single item was misplaced or stolen.
He was deeply moved, recording that the indigenous people possessed very good customs and were such affectionate and generous people,
Asserting that no better land or population existed in the world. This genuine generosity became the foundation for the decisive action of building a permanent presence.
King Guacanaga's support was unwavering. He offered more gold and arranged for additional housing.
This level of cooperation led the admiral to formulate an extraordinary conclusion regarding the disaster. He interpreted the loss of the Santa Maria not as an accident, but as an act of divine providence.
He believed God had engineered the wreck precisely to ensure that the Christians would remain right there on Española.
This framing of the disaster as a divinely ordained event served a crucial political function. It rationalized the immediate necessity of leaving men behind.
Fulfilling 2 objectives. First, allowing the remaining Christians to trade and learn the language.
And second, to ultimately prepare to settle and subdue the region. The salvaged timber from the wreck provided the perfect, immediate building materials.
Utilizing the remnants of the flagship, they quickly constructed a fort named La Navidad, the Nativity.
A contingent of 36 men was carefully selected and left behind to govern it. They were provisioned with trading goods, provisions, all remaining arms and artillery, and the Santa Maria's ship's boat.
And the garrison included specialized professionals.
A carpenter, a caulker, a physician, a tailor, and a gunner. It was designed to be a self-sustaining political and military unit.
Before his departure, the admiral performed one final, calculated demonstration of authority.
Primarily aimed at instilling a lasting fear concerning the threat posed by the Caribs, who reportedly enslaved the local Tenaya population. It was both a warning and a promise of protection.
To achieve this, he ordered a Lombard cannon shot to be fired directly into the hull of the wrecked Santa Maria.
A dramatic display of firepower that caused the indigenous people to flee in terror. The admiral then explained the purpose of the weapons for both offense against their enemies and defense of King Guacanagari.
He assured the king that the remaining Christians, with their terrifying weapons, would act as a protective force.
He placed Diego de Arana, Pedro Gutierrez, and Rodrigo de Escobedo in joint command of the new settlement.
Having secured a base and an alliance, the admiral determined that further exploration was too risky.
He prepared to sail immediately back to Castile in his one remaining ship, the Niña. He had to prioritize conveying the news of the new kingdoms to the sovereigns without delay.
Understanding that if the Niña were lost, the account of his extraordinary discoveries and the crown's claim would be lost forever.
The admiral saw the loss of his flagship as divine intervention, intended for the Christians to remain. But given the chain of command failures, the crew's betrayal, and their vulnerability, perhaps that divine intervention was less a blessing and more a tragic warning of the instability that lay ahead.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available on this channel. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs.
While this is an AI recording, the research that has gone into this production is comprehensive and focuses on very specific moments in history, designed to bring as much detail to the listener as possible. Thanks again for listening in.